Stories whispered, lessons shown on this channel. If I had known.
If I had known. Freedom without direction can break a nation. I remember the day we filled the streets. It did not begin as something extraordinary. At first, it felt like just another gathering. People moving, talking, watching each other carefully. But then something shifted. It was not loud at the beginning, not dramatic. It was subtle, almost invisible. A quiet transformation that passed from one person to another. For the first time in a long time, we were not afraid. That alone was enough to change everything. For years, fear had been part of our daily lives. It lived in our conversations, in our silence, in the way we looked at each other before speaking. We learned to measure our words carefully. We learned when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. We whispered our frustrations behind closed doors. We spoke in fragments, never fully expressing what we felt. Even in private, there was always a sense that someone might hear, that something might be misunderstood, that consequences could follow. Fear was not always visible, but it was always present. And then, on that day, something changed. Hope rose in a way that fear could not suppress. It moved through the crowd like a quiet fire, growing stronger with every voice that joined it. People who had once remained silent began to speak. Those who had watched from a distance stepped forward. Hope became louder than fear. And once that happens, there is no easy way to turn back. We believed we were standing on the edge of a new beginning. It felt real. It felt certain. There was a sense, almost overwhelming, that history was unfolding right in front of us, and that we were part of it. We told ourselves a simple idea, one that felt powerful because of its simplicity. Once he is gone, everything will be better. We believed it completely. We did not question it. We did not analyze it. We held on to it as truth. At the center of that belief was one name, Muammar Gaddafi. For decades, his presence had defined the country. To some, he was a protector, someone who had provided stability and identity. To others, he was a symbol of control, a barrier to freedom and change. But in that moment, none of those complexities seemed to matter. What mattered was what we believed he represented. An obstacle, a barrier between the present we lived in and the future we imagined. And so, we made a decision, collectively, emotionally, powerfully. We rose. The protests began as voices. Individual, uncertain, testing the boundaries of what was possible. But voices, when they come together, become something else entirely. They become a force. The streets filled with people. Chants replaced whispers. Energy replaced caution. What had once been unspoken was now being shouted openly. It felt like freedom had already begun. But there is a difference between the feeling of freedom and the reality of it. And we did not yet understand that difference. As the protests grew, so did the tension. What started as expression turned into confrontation. What began as unity slowly began to carry the seeds of division. And before we fully understood what we had started, the world was watching. What we experienced in those days would later be known as the Libyan Civil War. But in that moment, we did not see it as history. We saw it as hope. At first, it felt like victory. The news spread quickly, carried from one voice to another, until it reached every corner of the streets. He was gone. Just like that. The man who had shaped our lives for so long gone. The reaction was immediate. People celebrated. Strangers embraced each other like old friends. Laughter replaced tension. Tears flowed freely, not from sadness, but from relief. We are free, we said. And for a brief moment, it felt true. It felt like something heavy had been lifted. A burden we had carried for so long that we had forgotten what it felt like to live without it. But even in that moment, there was a quiet thought. one that would only fully reveal its meaning later. If only we had known. Freedom came, but it did not come alone. It came with confusion. It came with power struggles. It came with silence. Not the silence of fear we once knew, but a different kind of silence. The silence of uncertainty, of not knowing who leads, who decides, who unites. The structure we had lived under, whether we liked it or not, had provided a kind of order. When it disappeared, it left behind a space. And that space did not remain empty. Different groups began to rise, each one with its own vision, its own goals, its own understanding of what the future should look like. But those visions did not align. They competed, they clashed, they divided, and the unity we had felt in the beginning began to fade. We had removed what we believed was the problem, but we had not prepared for what would come after. And that became the real challenge. Life did not become easier. It became uncertain. Basic services, things we once took for granted, began to fail. Systems that had quietly supported daily life were no longer functioning the same way. Security, something that had once been controlled, even if imperfectly, became unpredictable. The same streets that had once echoed with hope now carried something else. Fear. Not the old fear we had known, but a new kind. One that came from unpredictability rather than control. Slowly, quietly, a painful realization began to grow inside many of us. It was not loud. It was not immediate, but it was undeniable. Maybe we didn't fully understand what we were asking for. This is not a story about defending the past. It is not about saying that what existed before was right or wrong. It is about something deeper. It is about understanding the weight of change. Because change is powerful, but it is also fragile. Removing something, no matter how difficult it may seem, is often easier than building something new. Destruction can happen quickly. It can be driven by emotion, by unity, by momentum. But rebuilding requires something else entirely. It requires planning. It requires patience. It requires agreement. And most of all, it requires vision. Today, when I walk through what remains of that moment, I do not only think about what we wanted. I think about what we did not consider. I think about the assumptions we made, the questions we did not ask, the possibilities we did not prepare for. We believed that one ending would automatically create a better beginning. But life does not work that way. Endings and beginnings are connected, but they are not the same. One does not guarantee the other. If I had known that freedom requires preparation, not just passion, that unity is harder to maintain than rebellion, that the future demands more than the fall of the past, I would have asked more questions. I would have listened more carefully. I would have tried to understand not only what we were fighting against, but what we were fighting for. Because there is a difference that only becomes clear when it is too late. Change is not just about breaking chains. It is about knowing what to build after they are gone. And that is where we were unprepared. That is where hope alone was not enough. Final reflection. Sometimes, the greatest regret is not what we fought against. It is what we failed to prepare for after we won. Because victory, without direction, can feel just as uncertain as defeat. And freedom, without unity, can become its own kind of struggle. If I had known, I would have understood that the future is not something that simply arrives. It is something that must be built, carefully, intentionally, and together. And without that, even the most hopeful beginning can lose its way. Thank you for choosing If I Had Known YouTube channel, where you find the life-changing stories. Stay tuned in and never miss the next episode.